We're going to be working on the first exercise from Unit 4, which is the exercise involved with importing data from text files. And I'm going to step through this exercise, kind of basically to demonstrate how to. And I'm hoping that all of you had no problems with the instruction set, but if you do, I do appreciate the feedback on it. As you guys know, Christopher put most of these together. I do some tweaks, and even though you might look at it a lot, there's always stuff you miss. And so if you see something that could be improved or better or broken or whatever, please let us know, and we will strive our best to correct it before the next batch of students sees it. All right, so the typical pattern here is just kind of a general instruction. And so we want to start Excel, and if you guys are following along, those that haven't completed this yet, obviously it'd be wise to follow along and try to get it done. But go ahead and open up Excel and then create a blank workbook. And you can see I've completed those steps. And those steps are, I hope, not problematic. But those steps are geared towards maybe somebody who is brand new. I'm going to pause the recording here for just 30. All right, so now that we have it open, let's move on to the next step. Now they want us to click the Data tab, click Get External Data from Text, and then pull in the liquor licenses CSV. Now, just a reminder, this file is located here, so all you have to do is click on it. It will download to your downloads folder, and you can open it from there. I guess I can demonstrate that for those watching the video. I do already have it downloaded. The import will happen directly from Excel. And this is different, and I want to make this distinction because I think I mentioned it last time. There's a difference between actually opening a CSV file and importing it. And as you'll notice here, I have a copy of it, and I'm actually going to double click it and open it to show you the difference. And I think that's a pretty pertinent difference. So you notice it just opened directly into Excel. It didn't ask any questions. Excel is the default program on my operating system for opening CSV files. There's a possibility on yours that depending on what other software you might have installed, it might not be. And so you might get a little prompt that says, hey, what program do you want to use to open this? In that case, you could choose Excel. But you notice it just brute force opened it and recognized it was a CSV file and put things into columns and rows as it is programmed to do. Unfortunately, this is not what we want you to do. There are times where you will pull in data exactly like this, but we're going to use a different tool. And the reason we're using that tool is to basically have a kind of a front-end processing of the data before it really gets into the application. So they want us to go to the Data tab and then click on Get Data. And then it brings up this secondary menu here. And we are basically opening a text file, and we are going to open this option. And notice that the little pop-up box there that appears, it says import data from a text, comma separated value, or formatted text, space delimited file. So there's many different ways, but CSV, the comma separated, is usually the most common. So let's go ahead and click that, and now we're going to point it to that file that we just downloaded. And I know I already have other copies of it, but this one's going to be at the top of my download. I usually sort my download folder. I usually go into detail mode, and this is just a tip, you guys. I like to be in detail mode, and then I usually reverse sort on the date. So the thing I downloaded most recently is at the very top. That seems to be most useful for me. So let's go ahead, since it's already there, let's just click on it and click on import. Now, Excel is not directly doing the import these days. And really what's happening is we're opening up a secondary tool that's paired up with the Microsoft Office suite called the Power Query Editor. And it is a tool that, in my understanding, is also accessible from other Office applications, which I think is kind of interesting. And I think the first iteration of it was only included with Excel. And then I'm also noticing that with higher level data analysis tools, that some of them are also bundling this type of tool with the product. So for example, when you guys later on in your program will learn about Microsoft Power BI, they use the Power Query Editor as a front end for sanitizing data if it's going directly into the product. Tableau, another powerful visualization tool, has a similar tool. It's not the same product, but it's very similar. That's designed to kind of manipulate, sanitize, make sure your data is okay before it hits the application and you start trying to do more powerful things with it. All right, so the first screen that comes up shows actually a preview of the stuff coming in. And as we looked at last time, it's looking at the first 200 rows. It's kind of automatically recognizing the delimiter, which is a comma, and the the font set that we're using. Now, all that's embedded in the file typically. But if it's not, and mind you, a CSV file does not have a lot of extra metadata that some like Office files will. And so some of this happens automatically as opposed to being embedded. But once you're here, if you like what you see right off the bat, just a helpful tip, and it seems like it's all coming in perfectly, you do have the option to just hit load and it will just go directly into Excel. There's no other steps to perform. But often when we're dealing with raw data from various types of systems, there will be issues. And, we kind of saw what some of these issues were from that video that we watched. And so we're going to go ahead and click Transform Data, which will bring up the full-blown Power Query editor. And so from this, program, this is really a separate program embedded into Excel. We're going to make some selections here. And let's go back to the instruction set because I want to make sure I'm not missing any steps here. So we did the select the liquor licenses CSV, click import. And then, of course, this is kind of interesting because the screen that you're seeing here, do you guys notice the screenshot is the old version of the tool that we just saw? And I recognize it because, having used it, I am currently using the Office 365 version of Office, which means that it automatically keeps it up to the latest version. And the official, boxed version is Office 2019 these days. And so whatever updates they do, and if they move from version 2016 to 2019, you would see changes. And I assume most of you are also running the Office 365 version or a relatively modern version. But if you think, I think it was the 2016 version where they switched over the tools. So if you're working an older version of Office, so I'm thinking like Office 2013, Office 2010, you'll see screens that look like this. So apparently when Christopher was putting this tutorial together, he was doing that. But I want you to notice that really, even though the interface is different, so if you happen to get this interface, it really is doing the same thing. It's giving you a preview of the data. Notice this is a lot more primitive looking though. It's allowing you to look at it, right? But it's not putting it into rows and columns like our tool did. It also has some of the tools we're about to use bundled in to this interface, because before they had the Power Query Editor, they just had this. And you see they called it the Text Import Wizard. And, it attempted to do much of the same type of things, which is start the import at row 1. My data has headers, which we're about to select. It finds the file origin, what it's delimited with, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And now we got this option, the delimiter option came up in the Power Query Editor, and it automatically detected comma. So this is kind of another, sub screen that we're not seeing. But you notice how in this older tool that if you select the correct delimiter, comma, then it does put it into a preview mode where it does show the column. So it's able to do that. There are some very rare occasions where people use other things to delimit files for very specific reasons, and those are pretty rare, but they do happen. Sometimes people do that to actually protect their data, and this is kind of an interesting side note. So if people know that, let's say your data is always stored in databases and the export format is always a CSV file, and they are able to hack it and get in and export a file and grab all your data, But maybe you write a script in there that throws in different qualifiers or different formats, and people do clever things like that. Otherwise, it's for functional reasons, but generally the same thing. All right, let's get to the point now where we're just about where this is. So we're back to the Power Query Editor, And in this case, the one thing that that video pointed out was, well, let's tell it that we have headers, right? And so right here, they have just a really quick button on it. Use the first row as headers, and use notice the converse of that. Use headers as first row. All right, and the difference. But we're going to click this button because it will then correctly identify, or did it?
There was an empty row, so if you'd removed the empty rows, it would have fixed it.
Yeah, and that's pretty astute. So the unfortunate thing is now that I've done this, I don't have a convenient like undo here. Do you guys notice that? So I actually have to back out.
You could probably just click the use first row button again.
You think that would have done it, Anthony?
I think I did that earlier.
Okay. All right. So that was the voice of experience. You know what? Let's test that theory. And I'm always a big believer of that. So if that's really the way it works. So we got past this screen, and let's just make the same mistake and see if we can undo that mistake. So let's hit it and unhit it. Oh, interesting. Do you see what it did?
It just keeps taking the next row.
It keeps, exactly. And so we kind of brute forced our way around it. So what would have been smarter, of course, is to go here, and this is one of those tools the guy showed really fast in the video, and it was really easy to miss, by the way. But here it says remove blank rows, and if we would have done that first, then this would have been an easy click over here. But we did it backwards. So I'm just going to click the button here that says remove blank rows, and we're trusting that it's going through the file now and removing all the blanks. And at least for the sample set that we have, it seems to have worked. I don't think that there's any other changes that we needed to make. Was there any that I'm missing?
No, the PDF actually didn't even say to do that. It just said put it in and then send it.
Yeah, Anthony, and that's a good distinction, because if you look down here, you can see the blank rows, right? And so they didn't have this tool in the previous version of Office. So I think that's pretty fascinating too, that this is a really nice, simple way to kind of clean up your data in advance and save you a whole bunch of heartache inside the product. So now that we're down to this point, we can, explore all these other different tools. And I really don't want to do that right now, because this is all we need to do. And I'll be real frank, this is typically all you need to do, about as much as this. They have put some more powerful tools in here because they're recognizing, that this sort of data analysis, even within Excel, is becoming more and more prevalent, and they want to like simplify things. And they're starting to lose a little bit of market share to other products. And so they're trying to like gain some of that back. The other thing that's kind of interesting to note is the Power Query Editor, because it does work across several of the Microsoft products, is also in some cases used to pull stuff into their databases and into their Power BI product and into SharePoint and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click Close and Load. And so it's going to transfer now from the Power Query Editor and then drop it into Excel directly. You'll notice that it keeps that sidebar up too, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because what it is telling you is that this is out there. And as the guy indicated, that if this file is updated and saved, that data will dynamically populate the spreadsheet. And I think that's a really super crazy powerful feature that with a regular CSV open, like I did the first step, right, the first example, that wouldn't be the case, because it's grabbing the static version of the file. This instead is forming basically a live data connection. And in some cases, and honestly, the way that I loaded it up, it didn't really do that, because you guys noticed that it was really a query. So if you think about your database terminology here versus a connection, I'm going to leave it like this because this is adequate for our work, but I am going to close the side panel because I just want the screen space for myself. Now you notice the one thing it did immediately is it dropped it in here and it grabbed the headers. And notice the headers do end up in the first row. They don't replace the A, B, C, D, E, right, stuff. But you notice how they have this little drop down next to them. And this is what we call the filter tool in Excel. And I know that you guys probably read up on this a little bit, but this is a tool that I use in Excel quite a bit, especially when I'm working with large data sets. Like, for example, I do all the faculty scheduling, and we usually run somewhere between like 110 to 150 sections of IT courses every semester. And then if I want to dig down and find like one instructor, for example, I would go to the instructor column, um, hit the drop down, unselect all, and then just choose the one I want to see. So notice just by clicking that checkbox there, I am able to now just look at the ones that are grocery store with beer and wine, click OK. The other ones did not delete. In fact, the row numbers are still all there. So you can see how it skips row numbers. And I can very quickly just come back here and reselect all, and it all comes back. But that Power Query Editor, what it does is it does apply filters to each one of these, and that becomes pretty helpful, especially in my mind when I'm trying to analyze what data might be in a column. So sometimes the data is really simple, like this one, right? And then sometimes it gets a little bit more complex, like this one, but it shows me all the different types of data that are here. And hopefully not everyone is unique, right? But if there are commonalities, this has the capability to isolate those and then just display those. And that can be very, very handy as a quick tool without even doing any sophisticated programming or routines or whatever. That's a really powerful thing. The other thing to know is that whenever you're working in Excel in like a normal fashion, if you have a column and you highlight that column, and you can come here and hit this sort and filter button, and it will add the filter tool to the column. The Power Query Editor by default adds it everywhere. And that may or may not be what you want, but I'm just pointing that out. All right, let's go back to the instructions now. So we got it in there, and it really is that, right? And he doesn't have a blurb in here about deleting the blank lines. I'm assuming that you guys made that assumption. Was that a safe assumption? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. And yes. Then, thank you for answering. I appreciate it. Did anybody have problems with the import, or would like us to take a moment and help you with yours?
Nope, that one worked out fine.
Charles, you're good too?
Yeah, that one I got.
Okay. All right, fantastic. All right, if there are no questions on this portion of it, let's go ahead and, well, I guess the one thing I didn't do is resize the columns. Let's do that last step. The way that I usually do that is you can go column by column, right? And resize. And a lot of us will do that. And why is this not resizing?
Because it's imported it, like kind of locked all of the squares.
Well, no, that's not actually it. It's because the column header is bigger, right?
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, right. And so in those situations, like if you were really trying to get all that stuff on the screen, I sometimes find the impetus, and I think it's kind of interesting to note that with these cells, right, they'll bleed over if the text is too long, but you can also have it wrap within the cell too. So you can actually format the cell so that the text wraps inside. So you can do this little trick, and then you can still see all the text, make it taller, and then that way you can save a little, bit of vertical screen space, and you guys can handle that any way you wish, frankly. My thinking is as long as you know what the columns are, it's fine. But if you're not really sure, then you might want to think about applying that technique. So now that I've applied this technique to column B's header, I can also use what we call the format painter. So I'm on this cell, hit the format painter, and this is a pretty fun one. And I can apply it to some of these longer ones. In fact, I'll just do that all the way across here. All right, so that format's been applied. So now when I go in here and I start adjusting all these columns collectively, you're going to see the ones that are, set that way will auto adjust. And in some cases, it just makes more sense to do it that way because the data inside there is so damn simplistic. There's no reason for it to be like, 3 miles wide. And it's not changing what's in the cell. Notice my double click's not working. but my manual column resize is. And you can just tinker with that. And I think that, ultimately it just looks a little bit better when it's condensed like this, because I'm not having to see such huge amounts of white space. This to me, frankly, is a little more comfortable to read just because it's a little more concise.
As long as the data fits.
That's a good point too, Anthony. Yeah, there's that. Right, this one doesn't like it, so I'm just going to go like this. And this is one of those things where if you ever work with spreadsheets, and this will be very common, where your data goes off the edge of the screen, you'll probably find yourself doing this type of thing just to make your life easier and be able to see everything as much as you can. All right, so that's just how to do that. All right, let's move on to the next tidbit. So I'm going to move on to the next exercise. Now, if you're all done with this, basically we take this spreadsheet, save it, maybe I should go through that step. And there's no real indication here of how you should name it, right? And, in the old days, I used to tell people exactly how to name their files. And these days, I frankly don't care, but you should name it something that is meaningful. And so what I might suggest is you get into the habit of having a folder for each class. I like to work with my Google Drive for school stuff, at least. And then what should we call this? Import CSV. I think that's pretty descriptive. All right, now we have our file all done. Then you would turn in that file. If there's no questions, let's move on to exercise 4. And this one also has a set of data here. We have a PDF and an Excel file that we're working with. And now when I looked at the gradebook, I think less of you completed this than completed the first assignment, but I'm hoping those of you that didn't finish the first one kind of did it just now. And if not, please do it soon. May as well. But let's go ahead and start with the exercise PDF. Let's get that on the screen so we have a set of instructions to work with. So the first instruction is basically to open the worksheet, import the data from a text file, and proceed from there. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's get the worksheet downloaded, and let's get the data file downloaded as well. I'm trying to get back to my browser here and get to the right tab. So let's go ahead and download the text file. Now, isn't that interesting? Did that happen to you guys? You clicked on it and it just opens up in your browser. All right, here's the workaround for that. There's a few different things, but it gives you a peek into the file already. And so there's no harm done here. And if you're a web person, which you guys all are, right? No, you're not. Some of you aren't. You can right click and view source, and the source code is exactly the same as the output code. So there's no HTML behind this that's making it render this way. But you do get to see the contents of it. And now some students will say, well, Ty, could I just come in here and Control A and copy and then open up like Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code and paste it in there, and then I have my text file. And then I'll say, okay, yeah, you can hypothetically do that, but what you run the risk of is that some of the characters here might not come in correctly. And that's a little bit of a risk, because if your data gets corrupted in transit, then what? You have to go clean it. Hopefully your tools can do it for you, but if not, you're going to have to do it. If you click this little this file here, and instead of just clicking it, choose Save Link As off of a right click. And I'm sorry, I clicked this tool. Then you can grab the file directly, and this is what I would prefer that you do. And so for now, I'm going to go put this back in that same folder where I just stored my other stuff. Probably makes sense. And let's just drop it in here. Okay, we already know what it looks like in there. Now let's go ahead and grab the Excel file. I'm going to do the same thing. right click, save link as, although this one, if you click it, will come down as a download. All right, go ahead and save that in the same folder. And then let's go ahead and get that file open. All right, let's take a look inside. All right, so here's the starter spreadsheet here. I want you to notice that as we use these kind of canned spreadsheets, that a lot of them do come with additional tabs, that are utilized for different exercises in some cases, or in other situations. And this is, one of those like VLOOKUP things, by the way. It's not always pretty to have like a VLOOKUP table next to the stuff you're trying to make look pretty. And so often people will put them on separate tabs. And yes, you can still link from one tab to another in Excel. And if you're not familiar with the fact that Excel can do multiple tabs, well, you can. You can just click this little plus button here and create one, very easily rename it, or just start doing fresh work, or delete it. But sometimes, Excel has more than one flat file attached to it, and that's important to know. And I don't know if you guys are aware of that or not, so that's why I'm bringing it up right now. In some cases, I kind of assume it's a given, but we shouldn't make that assumption, right? So maybe this is news to you. I'm hoping not, but maybe. Going back to the instructions, right here. All right, it says next on the classes worksheet, click cell A6, and then go to import the data from the text files. And so the reason we're doing this, and I think it's intuitive, right, is by clicking here and doing a data import, the implication is the data is going to drop into this spot. And that is how Excel works, by the way. And so let's go to the next step now. I'm trying to keep the step-by-step thing going. So let's go to import data from text files. Let's do that. So let's get data from text file. We don't know that it's a CSV file necessarily, but we were told that it's a text file, and we looked at it, so we know it's not a CSV file, and this is kind of interesting. All right, so now we got to find that particular file. I know it's in my G drive. Bring up the import tool. All right, so here's our front end once again. Now you notice what it's recognizing is that the limiter this time is actually a tab. And interestingly, if I go to that source folder, and I do suggest that you do this with the files you download, by the way. I always like to examine data files before I start futzing with them to know what I'm really dealing with. So I can look at it within some other product, but sometimes I frankly feel more comfortable if I look at it directly in a traditional text editor, if I know it's a text file. So for me, I'm going to open this up in my Notepad++. Of course, it comes up over here, but here it is. And once again, I can kind of like arrow through the product, and I'm hitting my right arrow key here. And then at some point, some of these delimiters are actually tabs. And this is my first indication right here that it's truly a tab, because I'm hitting the key once and it's jumping. And that can only be with the tab stop. Now, the reason the tabs here did not look the same as the ones in the browser, and I think this is kind of an interesting thing, is simply because of the font. Right? This font is smaller and a different type of font. And so when it went from, this character here to jump to that position here to start the next one, that is performed with a tab stop. But because of the font size difference, here the space is larger than it is here. But I assure you, this is a tab stop. If we could examine the underlying code, that's a tab, that's a tab, that's a tab, I think, and this is certainly a tab. And so this is another very common format, by the way, that we've seen. And I will tell you, this is predominantly a legacy format, the tab delimited files. So like in the old days, databases more typically would export tab delimited files rather than comma separated files. And so we still see this, older database systems from different platforms will often do this. Does anybody have any thought as to why would you set up a database to have tab delimiters as opposed to a comma? Any thoughts? Well, here's the idea, from a basic standpoint. What if the information you're typing into the database requires a comma within its content? I can't think of a really good example offhand, but what if, right? So that would be one of the reasons why they do that. Maybe the information that's in the database field is a numeric value that has commas in there for formatting. That's highly speculative, of course.
Yeah, and some English switch commas and periods, like in Europe or whatever. So
yeah, that's another good point, Anthony. A tab is a little bit more universal. You don't know how a comma is necessarily used in different languages. All right. So now that we have that piece out of the way, let's move on to the next instruction. We're still doing the import. Yeah, that's right. There we go. All right, so it recognizes the tab delimiter. It's looking at the first couple hundred rows. Apparently there aren't that many rows, and it seems okay to me, right? All right, so let's go to the transform area, and we just want to make sure that it's looking okay here. Do we want to do the first row as headers here?
No, we already have headers.
Yeah, we don't. So I think this all looks okay. It looks pretty clean. We're dropping it directly into position. Notice there's one blank row at the bottom.
Well, I'd like to see what you do with that, because in this version of Excel, it made a new sheet when I imported.
Okay. And Anthony, let's go ahead and do that. And I want that exactly to happen. So you're
Okay.
kind of
I figured you would
read
get
my
nervous.
mind here.
Yeah.
Right. So it created a whole new spreadsheet, or did it? Or it created a new sheet, not a whole new spreadsheet. But that's not what we wanted. Now, granted, I can come in here and I can grab this, right, and move it over to where I wanted it to go. That to me seems to kind of defeat the purpose in some cases, right? So I could literally come in here, copy this, go back to here, and paste it. All right, let's go back and do that import one more time.
One more thing.
Yes.
If you notice, your line 72 is an empty. I was wondering why it didn't remove that. It didn't remove it on mine either.
Well, that's because the null characters, even though they're null, there's actually a difference between nothing and null.
Null and yeah.
And I don't know if you guys were taught that in your programming class, but that null technically is a value, and because it's a value, and even though we don't see it,
it's not still empty.
It's not empty.
I just didn't know how Excel knows that, or like how would you tell?
Well, okay. Well, the answer to that, Anthony, let's go back and do the import again.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Is really kind of on the front end of it. And so if I'm doing, and I said workbook, right? We can just come here and do it again. All right, we're going to go to the transform. Now, interestingly, and I'm going to bet you tried this too, Anthony. Did you try removing blank rows?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it didn't care. You can just straight up delete that one, but
yeah. So I'm going to choose remove blank rows, but notice, well, it did treat it as a blank row, so it did.
It didn't do that last time, or when I tried it. So.
Oh, it didn't? Okay.
No.
Interestingly. All right, let's go ahead and close and load it and see if it has a difference. So once again, it's doing the same thing,
and it's gone.
Rid of that. All right. So I think what's happening here is we're seeing what is a a difference between the versions of Excel, and maybe there's a way to trigger it. So I wouldn't count this as like we're done here. In fact, I might, now I almost kind of feel challenged, right? To like, all right, well, now I want to try to do this and see if I can make it work, that kind of attitude. And I'm not seeing from like a right click here that they're allowing direct data import. You guys noticing that? But it does give me this option.
I didn't know how to use that because it seems to be within its own sheet, so I didn't.
Right. Well, here's what you do. When you're in an interface like this, you just go to that sheet, typically. Oh, no, you got to click that button first, sorry. Then you go to the sheet. Okay, well, now it's not. Now it's just fighting me. Where's the data for your table? Okay, normally, folks, when you're here, right, in this tool, it allows you to go to the other sheet, but apparently it's not letting me. So, all right, so I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here. All right, so I think we're left with really no choice but to manually pull the data over. And so I'm just going to come in here, grab it all.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I didn't really see how to get it.
And let's go back to classes and paste it in. Now we're assuming that this data matches the headers. I'm just, once again, I'm reviewing it. This is just my habit, is I like to look at it and know what I'm dealing with. Because it did drop in to a sheet, and you guys notice how it's also pre-formatted. It's got like the alternating colors and all that stuff. And this is a question that I'll get from people with Excel quite often. It's like, well, Ty, this is like alternating colors. Does it have to be that way? Well, you know what, folks, it doesn't. In fact, I can come up here when I do my paste, I can actually choose instead of to paste as is. And I want you to notice I haven't done it yet. I'm hovering over the options. I can also choose the one where I'm just pasting the values. And for me, that's one of the fail-safe tools that we have, because it's going to strip the formatting. And I don't necessarily know if we want the alternating colors or not. What does the sample sheet show? We don't know, right? And then if we add this formatting here, then we're going to kind of feel obliged to add it everywhere else too. I'm going to just go with the values for now, because frankly, that's what I would do in my own circumstances. I would want to control the formatting myself if there's formatting. All right, we got that first piece done, and I think that's pretty good. Let's move on to the next set of instructions. And then we have, ultimately we got to that point. But now we want to like play a little bit with the filter tool. And we are going to go to the data tab where we should already be there. And we're going to go ahead and create a custom filter. Now we saw like the quick filter. That's what we were playing with before. But the two tools are related, and you'll see kind of a correlation. Notice the little drop-down boxes that appear on these columns, and that's what we're working with. So let's go back, and let's go. I'm going to close this other import here, and I'm going to just come in here, and they want us to filter on by instructor. Okay, so one of the things I usually do when I'm creating a filter is if I know there's like a column header, my practice, by the way, is I usually sit on the column header before I turn a filter on. And this comes from experience, by the way. Although you can tweak it from here, go ahead and hit the filter button if you haven't done that already. It just automatically recognizes your column headers and then poises you to do the rest of the process here. All right, let's go down here. We want to pick out Julio. So let's find Julio on the list here. And we're going to start by deselecting. And I must have scrolled right past him. Or maybe it wasn't Julio. Maybe I should learn how to read. Jules, Cirillo, and Lisa Render. All right, so let's find those two people here. There's Jules. Sorry, Julio. And Lisa. All right, so I can select more than one. And then we're going to say okay, and then we're going to see just the results for those two. Now, because we're kind of completing steps on this, one of the instructions is also to kind of take screenshots. And if you're doing the screenshot thing, those screenshots will go into a Word document typically. But you could also do that here in Excel, by the way. There's no reason why you can't screenshot Excel and paste into Excel. I'm just giving you ideas. All right, so that was
I thought that was kind of a bit jank to do for a homework assignment.
Yeah.
I thought about it, but I was like, I don't know about that one.
Okay, well, I'm glad you kind of had a second guess on that yourself. The next thing that we want to do is we want to filter by course fee. But you know what, Anthony, now you got my head turning here. I'm going to actually go and create a separate sheet here. And you know what? I'm going to move it to the end. I'm going to right click, rename. I feel like I'm dared now to do it, right? And maybe do screenshots, right? And then in this spreadsheet, we can do really like a couple of simple things to make it, first of all, not look like it's a spreadsheet. First of all, you can just get rid of the grid lines. Then we can come back to the classes table here. And with this first filter that we did, I can then bring up my snipping tool, whether you use the old one or the new one, whatever. And then just come in here and, screen grab the result. And, and this is probably enough. Of course, you can copy it, come back over here. I mean, it's just like working a Word doc at that point. And I would probably stay away from margins myself, and then just paste it, and there it is. So I just want to give you the idea that, yes, you can do all that stuff inside of Excel too. And then if you want to say something about it, all right, so we should probably demonstrate that too. You can come in here and you can either type right into the cells if you wish. Some people will do that. Other people will actually start to insert different types of objects. And what I'm looking for is just a text box. And I don't even see where they have that here anymore. There it is, right? And I would just put it in a simple little text box and say, here is the filter thing, or, or whatever, whatever you put in there. And just as simple as that, you can get the screenshots. And so just an idea for the future. Also, when you guys are asked at times to reflect on what you did, you can do it right in the spreadsheet too. That's fine. I'll find it. If we get really kind of heavy on this, if you think this is kind of silly to do, this is our way of proving that you did it. Because how do I know otherwise that you got the filters to work? So that's kind of the thinking. All right. Let's filter.
Okay, next. So would you rather that then?
Well, I'm thinking, Anthony, it makes more sense to me, because then it's one file to submit instead of two.
Okay.
And if you've submitted two so far, hey, whatever, and not a big deal.
I can move them. I got them in a Word doc, so I'll just probably do that then if you want the whole. I didn't know if you wanted the file, so yeah, I can just do that.
Yeah, I like to have, the preference is to have the Excel file ultimately.
Okay.
And
sure.
Now that you guys see that you can do your screenshots right in there, and I suppose I could write the instruction set to kind of indicate that too. But we're kind of plowing through this together. All right, let's do another filter. And this one's a little bit different. So we're going to filter. We're going to select only those courses with fees greater than or equal to 50. So let's go back to the spreadsheet. And now we're going to go to fees. Oh, wait, that's okay. That's over here, sorry. And we're going to hit the filter. And tell me now, if you guys watch the videos, of course, you know the answer to this. How do I just designate greater than 50? Or I just hit all the ones that are like up here? And then I'm done?
Nope, number filters above the categories.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a number filter here. And notice, what was the criteria again? Greater than?
Or equal to 50.
Greater than or equal to 50. So now I have to do the process again because I unclicked it. But I'm unselecting all. Greater than or equal to. So you see how it's already predetermined. And then you just type in your value. In some cases, you can make cell references here, by the way. Or it can choose one of the predetermined values, right? That's already in the list. 50 just happens to match with one. So I'm going to grab that one. And notice that you have the ability here to add additional criteria. So if I want to do greater than or equal to 50 and less than something else, I can do that. Or, I can set up an or criteria and an criteria. And it's these kind of weird little situations in Excel where it helps to be a programmer because you understand even what these things mean, right? Like a typical person that never learned programming has never been faced with, what's the difference between an and statement and an or statement, so I think that's pretty important. So let's go ahead.
By doing databases and whatnot, you kind of learn how to do those forms too. So
yeah, exactly.
Understand all of it.
Exactly. And now we set the fees to be greater than or equal to 50. And you notice we do include one that's 50. So we know the equal to works. And then we have a few others here that narrow down our list a little bit more. Once again, you would screenshot this one. So you could, just to demonstrate the process. You don't have to get really like super crazy with I'm a fan of keeping them pretty simple. And see, almost seems like easier to do it in Excel than Word because you can like pick what cell it starts on, and then you can just keep writing stuff just to show me that you did it. Okay, back to the instructions. Next, it says select range A1 colon I60. So that is everything that is visible, apparently. And notice that they're having us do this, so even though we're filtered, we're selecting only the things that are visible on the screen. And that's kind of a mind bender too. So one of the reasons why we even filter to begin with is to be able to grab just the stuff we need as opposed to everything on the sheet. Now, it does tell us to copy, so let's go back and copy. So I'm going to do my copy here. And you can see the little dotted lines. Have you guys noticed that in Excel, that when you do a copy, that it highlights like that? And then if you hit your escape key, the copy is canceled, by the way. So I'm just going to recopy it just so you can see that it's an active copy. I forget what the next command is. Click the Filtered Worksheet tab with cell A1 in the clipboard group and paste. You should now see the filtered data in the filtered tab. So what they're talking about is here, we're going to right click and then we're going to paste. And so now you're seeing basically the output of that on a pre-configured tab. So they had the headers all set to go for you and everything and all that. But now we paste it in and now it is contiguous information in the spreadsheet and would be better for like reporting purposes perhaps than using a filtered version because all those little arrows are gone and some of the other stuff. All right, any problems with this one, folks? Okay, good. All right, my machine is kind of hiccuping here a little bit. I don't know if it's the screen recording that's pushing it a little too hard or what. Now it says go back to the classes worksheet and escape from the selected area, which is what I was talking about. Back to the classes area and then escape. And notice that stops the filter, but I think what's really meant here also is to cancel the filters. And I'm going to do that. So I'm going to cancel the filters. And notice how the numeric one here is still checked, right? And so we can typically change it if we need to or edit it, but I'm just going to remove it like that. Now, all right, so we did all the instructions here. Clear the data tab, then in the certain filter group, click the filter button, remove the custom filter. You should see all the data again. Okay, we did that. Next, you want to filter only those courses that begin with the word basic. All right, so let's try that one. Hit the filter tab. And then once again, I mean, it's not a matter of just, manually. I mean, yes, I could manually come in here and just say, well, here's basic, right? And I'm hoping that's not what you're doing, right? Because you can do it that way and get the correct result. really what we intend for you to do in this case, you notice how here I don't have an option for number filter because it recognizes we're not dealing with numbers, but I have a text filter, and notice I can choose one that says begins with and just type the word basic. Right now, interestingly, I can also, for example, choose other options here. So maybe if I wanted, I could just say equals basic, but none of them would match. And then notice here it says use question mark to represent any single character, use star to represent any series of characters. So I could also do it like this, like with a wild card. That's a possibility too. But I am going to choose begins with because that's a really common one to use, by the way. Let's just say okay, and then we can see that it correctly grabbed all the right ones. Once again, screenshot this and show me that it worked. All right. Any problems with that one, you guys? Okay. Moving on here, getting towards the tail end. Next thing it says sort data and use the subtotal tool to summarize data. When data is grouped, you can use the Excel subtotal tool to display summary statistics, sums, counts, for example, for each group. Before adding subtotals to tabular data, the rows need to be sorted by the column being subtotaled. And it says don't forget to clear any filter. So let's start there. We know we have a filter on here. Let's clear that filter, bring back all the data. And another thing that you can do is you notice the filter button is still turned on here. We can also uncheck it and all those little filter keys go away. And so that's a helpful thing to know. You don't always have to have that turned on. You can turn it off too. So we did what was asked. We got rid of the filters. And let's go back to the instructions because I forgot them already. So first we want to sort rows by instructors. All right, so let's come up here. And can I do the sort now without the filter thing? Well, the filter thing isn't going to sort it for me, is it? But the tools are kind of related, which is why they have them in the same category. And how do you guys suggest that I sort?
Say that again.
What's the suggested sort? Should I just hit A to Z and call it a day? Now, most of you did that, right? Can we probably guess that you did that? And I think that's absolutely fine, as long as you're aware of like the person by a first name basis. When I hit that sort button, did it just sort this column or did it sort the whole table?
The whole table.
Yeah, and that's really important to know that Excel, when you sort a column, attempts or does actually keep all its related data together, because if we're sorting one column and it breaks all the others, I mean, what's kind of the point there? Then all the data becomes disassociated and frankly meaningless. So you got to keep that in mind. So we have the instructors sorted. Let's go on to the next step. Now that we sorted the data, we can create subtotals for each instructor. Click on A6 in the outline group, click subtotal. So let's see if we can do this little bit here. So A6. Okay, so in this little tool, what should I click on? I know some of you have done this and some of you haven't. How do I do this? Is this where I do it? I'm kind of very slowly moving my mouse up to the right spot. You guys catching this? Oh, there's a button up there called Subtotal. All right. So right now, I'm on Angela Miller, and I'm in the instructor category. The data is sorted, so it's grouped. I'm going to hit the Subtotal button, and it's going to recognize what I'm doing. It recognizes where I'm at, and it's also looking for things that it can subtotal. And this is kind of one of the fun things about this tool, is it will look in the column and say, well, this is text. I can't really subtotal that. I can categorize it, but I can't subtotal it. And so what do you think about this? These selections? Do we have to change any of them? Well, they want us to add income, instructor fee, and profit and loss. Notice at each change in instructor, so every time we change instructors, here it's assuming course. So first thing we have to do is we're looking by instructor. So each change in instructor, use the sum function for income, instructor fee, and profit and loss. I think the two bottom boxes are left the same. And now we're going to go ahead and say okay. And then I want to show you kind of the same thing that we saw in that video. You know, the subtotals with this tree structure on the side here, so you can kind of collapse it down if you want to. Because our data was sorted, this worked. So I was able to see all of Angela Miller, and then total these other columns. Now, why did these all come up zeros? Shouldn't we have seen?
They're all blank.
Yeah, they're all blank. That's exactly correct. Let's go ahead and take a look at undoing this. And then I want to go back here. And I thought originally we had some values in here. Didn't we have values in here?
Yes, but I think the subtotal messed it up.
Yes. So what we want to do is I'm actually going to Control Z again, if it allows me to. It might not. Apparently I don't have that many levels of undo here. But yeah, there was a spot that had a formula. And this formula really should have been extended. So I'm going to do it now. There's no harm done in the aftermath of the sort. We just have to find the original formula. And what we probably should have done is copied it down. And so we didn't, but we're doing it in the aftermath. Hey, at least we caught on eventually, right? That's one way to look at it. And so now we have all those values, and they're all relative formulas. So now let's do that subtotal thing again. And so you do have to be on the data tab for that, right? Instructor, sum, income, instructor fee, and profit loss. So let's go ahead and click. And so this looks a lot better. So this gives us actual tangible figures. So, you know, if you do this piece of it, this is what it should look like, ideally. If you miss the totals, you know, just go back and fix that. You know, if it's already sorted, you can unsubtotal it. You guys remember how to do that?
The left part.
Yeah.
You click on subtotal again and then click like remove.
Very good, Charles. Right. We can easily add it back. The little tree structure on the side, I think, can be pretty handy too. You know, depending on what level you want to take it to. But I think this is a really helpful little tool, especially if you work with facts, figures, numbers, and large data sets. All right. Any questions on that one? You guys are good? It all worked? All right. They show us our output, and I think that's it, folks. All right. So, you know, since that's the last function that you perform. Okay, somebody's voice is breaking up there, real interestingly. You're okay, Charles? All right. Since the last thing that we did in that spreadsheet was doing the sort, you can actually leave your spreadsheet like this. You don't have to screenshot this one. And then when you save this, turn in a saved version of the Excel spreadsheet. I hope you guys latched onto the screenshot thing, and we'll use that if you're asked for it. But some steps can only be seen with that, which is why we do it. The other, approach is that you can take the stuff that's filtered and paste it somewhere else. So you could just keep pasting that stuff here so we can see it. So that's another approach. Whatever you think is most efficient, as long as I can see that you did it, that's really the part that matters to me. All right, this video ends here. That was the exercises for Unit 4. We are moving on to new stuff.